Listen to me carefully, because what I'm about to tell you will change everything. Right now, as you sit there, you are speaking your future into existence. Every sentence you complete is a seed planted in the garden of your subconscious mind. And here's what terrifies me about most people. They're ending their sentences with poison. They're ending their sentences with poison. They're completing their thoughts with destruction. They say, I can't afford that. I'll never find love. I'm always sick. Nothing ever works out for me. Do you understand what you're doing? You're not just describing your life. You're not just describing your life. You're commanding it. You're giving orders to the most powerful force in the universe, the subconscious mind, and you're telling it to create more lack, more loneliness, more suffering. Please, I'm begging you, stop finishing your sentences with negatives, because your subconscious doesn't argue, it doesn't question, it simply says yes and gets to work making your words become flesh. I've spent decades studying the human mind, watching thousands of people transform their lives, and I can tell you with absolute certainty that the way you end your sentences is the way you end your sentences, is the way you end your story. The people who finish their thoughts with hope, with possibility, with faith, they're the ones who break free. They're the ones who break free. They're the ones who heal. They're the ones who rise from nothing and build everything. But those who punctuate their statements with defeat, they stay stuck. Year after year, they wonder why nothing changes, never realizing they've been the author of their own prison all along. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Joseph, you don't understand my situation. You don't understand my situation. You don't know how hard things are for me. And you're right, I don't know your specific circumstances. But I do know this. Your circumstances were created by your previous thinking, your previous speaking, your previous speaking, your previous belief patterns. And they can be recreated, remade, transformed completely by changing how you think and speak right now, in this moment. The power that created your current reality can create a new one. But first, you must stop reinforcing the old one with every sentence you speak. Let me share something with you that I've never forgotten. Years ago, I met a woman who came to one of my lectures in Los Angeles. She was perhaps 50 years old, though hardship had aged her beyond her years. After everyone else had left, she approached me with tears streaming down her face. She said, Dr. Murphy, I've been coming to your lectures for 3 months now, and I understand the principles you teach. I really do, but nothing is changing for me. I'm still broke. I'm still alone. I'm still sick with this condition the doctors can't seem to cure. I asked her to sit down with me, and I said, tell me about your day. Tell me what happened today before you came here. And she began to speak. Within 5 minutes, I had counted 17 negative declarations. I couldn't pay my electric bill. I never have enough money. My body won't cooperate with me. Nobody cares about someone like me. I can't seem to catch a break. Nothing I try works out. On and on it went. And these weren't complaints, you understand. She wasn't whining. She wasn't whining. She was simply describing her reality as she saw it. But here's what she didn't realize. She was also prescribing her reality. She was also prescribing her reality. She was writing tomorrow's script with today's words. I stopped her gently and said, my dear, you've just told me why nothing is changing. You're studying the truth in my lectures. But the moment you leave, you're going back to the old language, the old patterns, the old way of finishing your sentences. Your subconscious mind is receiving conflicting instructions. For 1 hour with me, you feed it possibility. For the other 23 hours, you feed it impossibility. Which do you think will win? She looked at me as if I'd just revealed something both obvious and devastating. But Dr. Murphy, she said, I'm just telling the truth. I'm just describing what is. And this right here is the trap that catches millions. They think they're being honest. They think they're being honest. They think they're being realistic. They think that to acknowledge their problems is somehow noble or necessary. But what they don't understand is that there are many ways to describe reality, and the way you choose to describe reality, and the way you choose to describe it determines which reality you'll experience next. You see, the subconscious mind, this magnificent powerhouse within you, doesn't distinguish between describing and decreeing. It doesn't know the difference between observation and creation. When you say, I am broke, your subconscious doesn't hear you analyzing your bank account. It hears you identifying as a broke person, and it immediately begins to align all your behaviors, perceptions, and opportunities with that identity. When you say, I never meet the right people, your subconscious doesn't hear you lamenting your social life. It hears you commanding it to ensure you continue not meeting the right people. It will literally filter out opportunities, blind you to possibilities, and steer you away from the very connections you claim to desire. This is not metaphysics or mysticism, though it is profoundly spiritual. This is the basic operating system of human consciousness. Your subconscious is the most loyal servant you'll ever have. It never takes a day off. It never questions your authority. Whatever you tell it consistently and with feeling, it accepts as an assignment and works day and night to bring it into manifestation. The problem is, most people don't realize they're giving it assignments at all. They think they're just talking, just venting, just being honest about their struggles. But every sentence is a prayer. Every statement is a command. Every word is a seedment, is a command. Every word is a seed. So when you finish your sentence with a negative, when you complete your thought with lack or limitation or fear, you're not just expressing yourself. You're not just expressing yourself. You're impressing your subconscious. You're making an impression, like pressing a seal into warm wax. And that impression becomes the mold from which your future experiences are cast. Now, I want to be very clear about something because I can feel some of you resisting this idea. I'm not asking you to lie. I'm not asking you to lie. I'm not suggesting you pretend problems don't exist or that you deny reality. What I'm asking you to do is far more sophisticated than positive thinking or wishful denial. I'm asking you to become conscious of the creative power of your words and to use that power intentionally rather than accidentally. I'm asking you to take responsibility for the fact that you are not merely a narrator of your life. You are the author of it. And here's what most people miss. Your subconscious doesn't care whether your words are true or false, helpful or destructive, deliberate or habitual. It simply accepts them and begins working to make them manifest in your experience. When you say, "I never have enough money," your subconscious doesn't argue. It doesn't say, "Wait, let me check the bank account first." No. It accepts that statement as an instruction and begins organizing your perceptions, your decisions, your opportunities around that declared reality. You'll overlook the raise that's possible. You'll miss the chance to ask for what you're worth. You'll feel a strange resistance to looking at investments or saving systematically. And then you'll point to your circumstances as proof that you were right all along, never recognizing that you were the architect of those very circumstances. I once worked with a man who came to me exhausted, burnt out, desperate for change. Within the first 10 minutes of our conversation, I counted how many times he used a particular phrase. 12 times he said it. "I'm so tired. I'm tired of my job. I'm tired of my job. I'm tired of fighting. I'm just tired all the time." I stopped him gently and asked, "Do you realize what you've been declaring over yourself?" He looked confused. "I'm just telling you how I feel." "No," I said. "You're doing far more than that. You're making a proclamation, and your subconscious mind is listening. Every time you declare 'I am tired,' you're instructing your deeper mind to produce more tiredness, to filter your experience through fatigue, to shut down energy and vitality." He was skeptical, of course, but I asked him to do something simple. For 1 week, stop using that phrase. Not to deny his feelings, but to change his declaration. Instead of "I'm so tired," say "I'm recharging my energy." Instead of "I'm tired of this job," say "I'm discovering what truly energizes me." 3 weeks later, he called me. His voice was different, lighter. "I don't know how to explain this," he said, "but I actually feel different. I'm sleeping better. I have more energy during the day, and I just accepted a new position that I wouldn't have even noticed before. The circumstances hadn't magically shifted overnight." He had. His words had reprogrammed his subconscious expectations, and his subconscious expectations, and his subconscious had begun reorganizing his reality. The transformation doesn't require you to become someone else. It requires you to become someone else. It requires you to stop pretending to be less than you are. And that pretension lives entirely in the language you've grown comfortable with. I've watched people transform their health the same way. A woman once told me she'd been saying for years, "I'm so clumsy, I always hurt myself." And sure enough, she'd trip, bruise herself, wake up with mysterious aches. Her physician found nothing fundamentally wrong, yet the injuries persisted. When she began affirming instead, "My body moves with grace and balance. I am coordinated and safe," something shifted within weeks. She stopped anticipating injury. Her movements became more confident, less tentative. The accidents simply stopped occurring. Was it magic? No. It was the removal of a subconscious instruction she'd been giving herself thousands of times. Your subconscious mind cannot argue with you. It doesn't judge whether your statements are currently true. It simply accepts what you persistently tell it and works to make your outer world match your outer world, match your inner declarations. This is why affirmation isn't about lying to yourself, it's about instructing yourself. Think of it this way: if you were training a dog, you wouldn't constantly say, "You're such a bad dog, you never listen, you always misbehave." You'd be programming that dog for failure. You'd be programming that dog for failure, yet this is precisely what most people do with their own subconscious mind. They program it with criticism, doubt, and expectation of failure, then wonder why life feels like such a struggle. The subconscious doesn't need you to believe your affirmation with every fiber of your being on day one. It needs repetition. It needs consistency. It needs your willingness to speak a new reality into existence before the evidence appears. This is faith in its most practical form, not blind belief, but deliberate instruction of your inner creative mechanism. I want you to understand something crucial. The absence of immediate results doesn't mean nothing is happening. When you plant a seed, you don't dig it up every day to check for roots. You trust the process. You water it. You give it light. The same principle applies here. The seed doesn't question whether it deserves to become a tree. It simply grows because that's its nature. And your mind is exactly the same. It doesn't argue with what you plant there. It doesn't argue with what you plant there. It accepts, it receives, it begins the work immediately. Now, I want to share something with you that changed everything for me when I finally understood it. Your subconscious mind is working right now, at this very moment, whether you're aware of it or not. It's regulating your heartbeat, controlling your breathing, managing thousands of functions in your body without you having to think about any of it. That's how powerful it is. That's how reliable it is. That's how reliable it is. But here's what most people miss. That same mind that's keeping you alive. That same mind that's keeping you alive. That's managing all these incredible processes. It's also working on whatever thoughts you've been feeding it. If you've been feeding it worry, it's producing worry in your life. If you've been feeding it fear, it's manifesting circumstances that match that fear. Not because it wants to harm you, but because it wants to harm you. But because it cannot refuse what you give it. Think about this for a moment. When you learn to drive a car, at first every action is conscious. You think about the steering wheel, the pedals, the mirrors. It takes all your concentration. But what happens after a while? Your subconscious takes over. You drive without thinking. You can have a conversation, listen to music, and still navigate through traffic perfectly. Your subconscious learned the pattern, accepted it as true, and now it executes it automatically. This is the mechanism we're talking about. This is the mechanism we're talking about. This is the power you already possess. You've already proven you can program your subconscious mind successfully. The question is, what are you programming it with? Every time you say, "I can't afford this," your subconscious hears that as an instruction. Every time you say, "I'm not good enough," it accepts that as fact. Every time you say, "Things never work out for me," you're giving it a blueprint to follow. And it follows that blueprint perfectly because that's what it does. It's completely faithful to what you impress upon it. So the question becomes, what are you feeding it? What are you feeding it? What are you telling it is true about your life, your health, your relationships, your worth? Because here's something most people don't realize: your subconscious doesn't distinguish between a real experience and one you vividly imagine. When you replay a painful memory over and over, or when you replay a painful memory over and over, or when you rehearse a future conversation where everything goes wrong, your subconscious accepts that as current reality. It doesn't know you're just thinking about the past or worrying about tomorrow. It only knows what you're impressing upon it right now. This is why worry is so destructive. It's not just uncomfortable, it's creative. When you worry, you're using the same imaginative power that could heal you, that could bring you prosperity, that could transform your relationships. But you're using it in reverse. You're painting vivid pictures of what you don't want, and your subconscious says, "Understood, this is what we're creating." Think about someone who constantly worries about getting sick. They read every article about diseases. They interpret every small sensation in their body as a symptom. They lie awake at night imagining doctor visits and diagnoses. What are they doing? They're impressing illness upon their subconscious mind with emotional intensity, with repetition, with focused attention. And then they wonder why they're always unwell. I'm not saying that thinking about illness causes every sickness. That would be simplistic. But I am saying that the mental attitude you habitually maintain has everything to do with your vitality, your resistance, your body's ability to heal and maintain itself. Your subconscious controls every function of your body. It manages your heartbeat, your digestion, your immune system, the healing of a cut on your finger. It's doing all of this without your conscious direction, but it responds to the general tone of your thinking. When that tone is one of fear, stress, and negativity, it affects every cell in your body. I've seen people recover from serious conditions by changing nothing except their mental diet. They stopped feeding their subconscious images of sickness and started impressing upon it ideas of health, wholeness, and vitality, not as a desperate hope, but as an accepted fact, and their bodies responded. Now, I want you to understand something crucial about this process. The subconscious mind doesn't argue with you. It doesn't debate. It doesn't say, well, let me check the facts first. It accepts what you impress upon it with feeling and conviction. This is both the great danger and the great opportunity of your mental life. If you constantly say, I can't afford this, your subconscious accepts it and creates circumstances that match that belief. If you say, I always get sick in winter, you're giving your subconscious a command, and it will faithfully execute that command. You see, your subconscious is like the soil. It doesn't care whether you plant roses or poison ivy. It will grow whatever seeds you plant with absolute impartiality. But here's where it gets interesting. You can change the seeds right now. This very moment, I've watched people transform their entire financial situation by changing one habitual thought pattern. There was a businessman who came to me, drowning in debt, convinced he had bad luck with money. Every venture failed. Every opportunity slipped through his fingers. And he had a phrase he repeated constantly: money just doesn't stick to me. Think about that. He was literally instructing his subconscious mind to repel wealth. And it was doing exactly that, with perfect obedience. I taught him to reverse the pattern. Every night before sleep, when the conscious mind relaxes and the subconscious is most receptive, he would repeat, money flows to me freely and abundantly. I am a magnet for prosperity. Not as a desperate plea, but as a statement of fact. He felt it. He visualized his bank account growing. He felt it. He visualized his bank account growing, his debts dissolving, opportunities opening. Within 6 months, everything had changed. A business opportunity appeared seemingly out of nowhere. Old debts were forgiven. Money that was owed to him suddenly came through. His outer world had no choice but to reflect the new patterns established in his inner world. Was it magic? No, it was law. The law of your own mind, operating with mathematical precision. This law doesn't play favorites. It doesn't care if you're rich or poor, educated or unschooled, young or old. It operates for the street sweeper exactly as it operates for the street sweeper, exactly as it operates for the scientist. The difference in their lives isn't in the law, it's in how they use it. You see, most people go through life never realizing they have this power. They accept whatever conditions surround them. They say, well, that's just how things are. That's just how things are. That's my lot in life. And in saying this, in accepting this limitation, they command their subconscious to keep things exactly as they are. But here's what I want you to understand. Your subconscious doesn't argue with you. It doesn't say, are you sure about that? Have you really thought this through? No. It simply accepts what you give it and works tirelessly to make it real. Think of it this way. If you planted tomato seeds in your garden, would you expect to harvest roses? Of course not. You'd laugh at the absurdity. Yet this is exactly what millions of people do with their minds, every single day. They plant seeds of failure, lack and fear, and then wonder why their lives don't bloom with success, abundance, and confidence. I once knew a woman who came to me in desperation. She was talented, capable, intelligent, but she couldn't hold a job. Every position she took ended the same way: conflict with her supervisor, followed by dismissal. This pattern had repeated itself 7 times. Dr. Murphy, she said to me, I must be cursed. Every boss I get is impossible to work with. I asked her a simple question: what do you think about before you fall asleep at night? She looked surprised, but then admitted. I worry about my boss. I imagine all the ways they might criticize me tomorrow. I rehearse arguments in my head. There it was. Every night, in that drowsy state before sleep when the subconscious is most receptive, she was programming herself for conflict. She was creating in her mind the very experiences she feared most. I explained to her what was happening. Your subconscious mind doesn't distinguish between a vividly imagined experience and a real one. When you rehearse those arguments, when you replay those confrontations in your imagination, you're creating neural pathways. You're training yourself, conditioning yourself for discord. She looked at me with recognition dawning in her eyes. So I'm creating what I'm afraid of. Precisely, I said. Your fear is not protecting you. It's programming you. It's programming you. And here's what makes this so insidious. Most people believe they're being prudent. They think, I'm just preparing myself. I'm thinking ahead. I'm being realistic. But there's a vast difference between intelligent preparation and fearful rehearsal. One involves practical planning with a positive expectation. The other involves emotional repetition of negative outcomes. When you mentally rehearse an argument, you're not preparing, you're manifesting. When you imagine rejection before asking for what you want, you're not being cautious, you're creating the very rejection you fear. When you play out worst-case scenarios in your mind, you're not being realistic, you're being an architect of disaster. I've watched this pattern destroy careers, marriages, health, and dreams. I've seen people sabotage themselves so consistently that they come to believe they're cursed or unlucky, when in reality they're simply operating a law they don't understand. The woman I counseled changed one simple habit. Each night, instead of rehearsing arguments, she began to imagine harmonious conversations. She pictured herself speaking with confidence and being heard with respect. She visualized her co-workers as supportive allies rather than adversaries. Within 3 weeks, her workplace had transformed, not because everyone else changed, but because she changed first. Her expectations shifted, and reality followed. This is the principle at work. Your subconscious doesn't distinguish between inner experience and outer reality. It accepts what you consistently feel as true. And when you feel something deeply enough, repeatedly enough, your subconscious mind reorganizes your perception, your actions, and even the opportunities that seem to randomly appear in your path. You see, most people wait for the world to change before they feel different. They say, I'll be happy when I get the promotion, or I'll feel confident after I lose weight, or I'll relax once the situation improves. But this is backwards. This is why they remain stuck for years, sometimes decades. The truth is far more empowering. You must generate the feeling first. You must become the person who already has what you desire in consciousness before it can materialize in your experience. Let me share another story that illustrates this beautifully. I once counseled a man named David who was drowning in debt. $30,000. Credit cards, medical bills, personal loans. Every morning he woke up with a crushing weight on his chest. His first thought was always about money, or rather, the lack of it. He came to me desperate, asking if prayer could make money magically appear. I told him what I'm telling you now. Prayer isn't magic. It's a psychological and spiritual law. And the law requires alignment. I asked David a simple question. How do you feel about money right now? His answer was immediate and visceral. Terrified, ashamed, like I'm drowning and no one can save me. Then that, I said, is what you're praying for. That's the message you're sending to your subconscious mind every single day. Terror, shame, drowning, and your subconscious is faithfully delivering experiences that match those feelings. His face went pale. He hadn't realized he was actively creating more of what he feared. I gave him a new assignment. Every night before sleep and every morning upon waking, he was to spend 10 minutes in a very specific mental state. He was to imagine not his debt but financial ease. He was to feel what it would be like to open his mailbox without dread, to check his bank account with calm confidence, to pay his bills with gratitude, knowing there was enough. Within a week, something shifted. He didn't win the lottery. He didn't inherit money from a distant relative. What happened was far more subtle and far more profound. First, an old client reached out unexpectedly. A project he'd written off months ago suddenly came back to life. The payment wasn't massive, but it arrived exactly when he needed it most. Then his landlord, who had been rigid about rent deadlines for years, suddenly offered him a 1-month grace period without him even asking. "Times are tough for everyone," she said simply. A week later, he found a check he'd completely forgotten about tucked in an old book. It had been there for months, waiting to be discovered. Were these coincidences? Was this luck? Or was this the invisible architecture of prosperity, responding to a mind that had finally learned to speak its language? You see, the subconscious mind doesn't distinguish between a large sum and a small one. It doesn't judge whether your desire is reasonable or too ambitious. It simply responds to the conviction behind your impression. When you plant a seed of prosperity with absolute faith, the subconscious begins orchestrating circumstances, encounters, and opportunities that align with that inner conviction. This is why worry is so dangerous. Every moment you spend anxiously checking your bank balance, you're impressing poverty upon your subconscious. Every time you tell someone, "I can't afford it," you're reinforcing lack as your identity. You're literally praying for the very thing you fear. But when you shift that prayer, when you begin to feel abundance before it appears, when you give thanks for prosperity before it manifests, when you give thanks for prosperity before it manifests, when you move through your day as someone who is financially secure, you activate a completely different set of creative forces. This is not theory. This is not theory. This is not wishful thinking. This is spiritual law in action, and it operates with mathematical precision. Let me give you a concrete example. I once counseled a woman who came to me drowning in debt. She owed thousands of dollars, creditors were calling daily, and she lived in constant anxiety about money. Her entire mental and emotional state was consumed by lack. Every thought was about what she didn't have, what she couldn't pay, what was missing from her life. I asked her a simple question: when you think about money, what do you feel? Her answer was immediate: fear, panic, shame. There it was. Every time money entered her consciousness, she activated those emotions. And those emotions became the prayer that her subconscious mind answered with perfect fidelity. I gave her a new instruction. Every night before sleep, she was to spend 10 minutes in a specific mental state. She was to spend 10 minutes in a specific mental state. She was to imagine opening her mailbox and finding checks. Not bills, checks. She was to feel the paper in her hands, see the amounts written, and most importantly, feel the relief, the joy, the gratitude of having more than enough. At first, she resisted. "But that's not true," she said. "I'm lying to myself." I explained what you must understand. Your subconscious mind doesn't distinguish between a vividly imagined experience and a real one. When you feel something with sufficient intensity and repetition, your subconscious accepts it as fact and begins to reorganize your reality to match that inner conviction. She committed to the practice. Every night, without fail, she entered that state of grateful abundance. She stopped talking about her debt. She stopped talking about her debt. She stopped rehearsing her problems. She redirected every anxious thought toward the feeling of financial freedom. Within 3 weeks, unexpected money began to appear. A forgotten tax refund, a bonus she wasn't expecting, a debt that was mysteriously forgiven due to a company error. Within 6 months, her entire financial situation had transformed, not through struggle, but through the consistent application of spiritual law. Let me emphasize something crucial, law. Let me emphasize something crucial here. This didn't happen because she worked harder at her job. She didn't take on a second shift or sell all her possessions. What changed was her inner conversation. And when your inner conversation changes, your outer world has no choice but to rearrange itself to match. This is what I mean when I say that assumption creates reality. Your assumption is the substance of what you hope for. It's the evidence of things not yet seen. You don't need to see how it will happen. You don't need to see how it will happen. You don't need to figure out the logistics. Your responsibility is singular. Hold the assumption until it hardens into fact. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. You're saying, "But Joseph, I've tried to think positively. I've tried to think positively. I've tried affirmations. They didn't work. And I'm going to tell you why they didn't work. It's because you were trying to paste positive thoughts over negative beliefs. You were trying to convince yourself of something you didn't actually believe. That's not assumption. That's wishful thinking. And there's a wishful thinking, and there's a world of difference between the two. True assumption doesn't require convincing. It requires decision. You simply decide that something is true, and then you live from that truth. You don't try to manifest it, you accept that it's already done. Think of it this way. When you sit down in a chair, do you affirm that the chair will hold you? Do you affirm that the chair will hold you? Do you visualize the chair supporting your weight? Do you repeat mantras about chair stability? Of course not. You simply assume the chair will hold you, and you simply assume the chair will hold you, and you sit. That's the quality of consciousness I'm describing. Your desire fulfilled must become as natural to you as sitting in a chair. It must be so accepted in your awareness that it no longer excites you with its novelty. When you can think of your wish fulfilled with the same casualness that you think of any established fact in your life, you're there. You've crossed the bridge. This is why I tell people to live in the end. Don't live in the process. Don't live in the hoping and the wishing and the wondering. Live in the hoping and the wishing and the wondering. Live in the assumption that it's already done. Because in the dimensionally larger world, in the world of causes, it already is done. You're simply waiting for the three-dimensional shadow to catch up with the four-dimensional reality. And here's what most people miss entirely. The feeling is the secret, not the visualization, not the affirmation, not the repetition of words until your throat goes dry. The asterisk feeling asterisk. When I ask you to live in the end, I'm not asking you to pretend. I'm not asking you to pretend. I'm not asking you to put on a performance for an invisible audience. I'm asking you to generate within yourself the emotional tone that would be natural to you if your desire were already a concrete fact in your world. Let me be blunt. Your subconscious mind doesn't understand English. It doesn't understand English. It doesn't understand French, German, or any human language. It understands feeling. It responds to feeling. It is moved by feeling alone. You can say I am wealthy 10,000 times while feeling poor, and you will remain poor. But feel wealthy, genuinely wealthy for 10 minutes, and you set causation in motion. The feeling is the engine. The words are just the key you use to turn it on. Think about this. When something wonderful happens to you, truly wonderful, you don't have to convince yourself to feel good about it. The feeling arises naturally, doesn't it? It floods through you without effort. Your chest expands, your breath deepens. Your breath deepens, your face relaxes into a smile you don't manufacture. That's the feeling I'm talking about. Now, here's the practice. You must learn to generate that feeling asterisk before asterisk the physical manifestation appears. You must feel successful before you see successful before you see success. You must feel loved before love arrives at your door. You must feel free before the chains fall away. This is not delusion. This is not delusion. This is not denial of present circumstances. This is the most practical, hard-headed realism you will ever encounter. Because feeling is the language of creation. When you feel differently, you are literally becoming a different person. And a different person, and a different person lives in a different world. I once knew a woman who came to me desperate. She had been trying to manifest a new home for 2 years. She had vision boards. She had affirmations taped to her bathroom mirror. She had done everything the books told her to do. Nothing had moved as a miracle. Nothing had moved. I asked her one question. When you visualize this new home, how do you feel? She paused. Then she said quietly, I feel worried. Worried that it won't happen. Worried that I'm fooling myself. There it was. The block. She was generating the feeling of worry, of lack, of doubt, and that feeling was her real prayer, her real instruction to the subconscious. And this is where so many people get trapped. They think they're doing everything right. They think they're doing everything right. They're saying the words, they're visualizing, they're affirming. But underneath it all, there's this current of fear running through everything they do. I've watched it happen countless times. Someone comes to me and says, I've been affirming abundance for 6 months. Why am I still broke? And when I sit with them, when I really listen, I can hear it in their voice. The affirmation isn't a declaration, it's a plea. It's not, I am prosperous, spoken with conviction. It's I am prosperous, spoken with conviction. It's I am prosperous, spoken with a question mark at the end. Spoken while checking the bank account obsessively. Spoken while checking the bank account obsessively. Spoken while lying awake at night calculating bills. The subconscious doesn't hear your words. It feels your conviction, or your lack of it. This is why I say that prayer without feeling is like a car without feeling is like a car without fuel. The mechanism is there, but nothing moves. You can sit in the driver's seat and turn the steering wheel all day long, but if there's no fuel in the tank, you're not going anywhere. The feeling is the fuel. The feeling is the fuel. The feeling is what activates the subconscious mind. Now, let me be very clear about something because this confuses a lot of people. When I talk about feeling, I'm not talking about manufactured emotion. I'm not talking about forcing yourself to feel happy when you're not. I'm not talking about pretending or lying to yourself. What I'm talking about is the natural feeling that comes from accepting something as true. Think about something you absolutely know to be true. Your own name, perhaps. There's no effort in believing your name. No strain, no force. You simply accept it as fact. And with that acceptance comes a quiet certainty, a natural ease. That's the feeling I'm talking about. When you impress the subconscious with a desire, you must do it with that same quality of acceptance. Not desperate hopings, not desperate hoping, not anxious wishing, but calm, natural acceptance that what you've claimed in consciousness is already yours in the invisible realm and must, by law, manifest in the visible. The woman who wanted her husband to stop drinking finally understood this. I told her, stop begging the universe. Stop worrying about whether it will work. Instead, feel what it would be like if he were already sober, not as something in the future, as something now. Close your eyes and feel the relief, feel the peace, feel the gratitude that this change has occurred. She looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, but how can I feel grateful for something that hasn't happened yet? And I said, that's the whole point. You must feel it first. The feeling creates the reality, not the other way around. The architects of their own defeat never realize they're holding the blueprints. They wake each morning, and before their feet touch the floor, they're already constructing the prison of their day. I know this meeting will go badly. I know this meeting will go badly. I'm sure they won't like my idea. This probably won't work out. And then, with scientific precision, they watch their predictions come true, never understanding they were prophets, not victims. You see, your subconscious mind doesn't argue with you. It doesn't debate. It doesn't debate. It doesn't say, are you sure about that? It simply accepts what you tell it and sets about making it real. When you declare, I can't afford this, your deeper mind doesn't question your authority. It immediately begins scanning your reality for evidence to support that statement. It will guide you away from opportunities, blind you to possibilities, and ensure that your bank account reflects your conviction. This is why affirmations alone often fail. You can stand in front of a mirror and repeat, I am wealthy, 1,000 times, but if underneath those words lies a feeling of lack, of unworthiness, of disbelief, your subconscious only receives the feeling. Words are surface ripples. Feeling is the deep current that moves everything. I've watched people sabotage the very things they claim to want. A woman desperate for love who unconsciously chooses emotionally unavailable partners. A man seeking success who arrives late to crucial meetings. They're not cursed. They're not unlucky. They're simply out of alignment. They're simply out of alignment. Their conscious desires are shouting one thing, while their subconscious beliefs whisper another, and the whisper always wins. The subconscious speaks the language of assumption. What do you assume about your assumption? What do you assume about yourself when no one's watching? What do you expect when you approach a challenge? That quiet, barely noticed expectation is your real prayer. That's what's being answered every moment of every day. You're not being punished by some external force. You're experiencing the natural consequences of your habitual mental imagery. The universe isn't conspiring against you, it's conspiring against you, it's conspiring asterisk, with asterisk you, reflecting back exactly what you've been broadcasting. This is why awareness is the first step to transformation. You cannot change what you don't acknowledge. You cannot change what you don't acknowledge. You must become conscious of your unconscious expectations. What are you really expecting when you wake up in the morning? What are you really expecting when you wake up in the morning? What do you genuinely believe about your capacity to change? Not what you asterisk say, asterisk, you believe. What do your emotions and reactions reveal about your true beliefs? I've counseled thousands of people over the years, and the pattern is always the same. Someone comes to me desperate for change. They tell me they want prosperity, health, better relationships. And I ask them a simple question. Do you actually expect these things to manifest, or are you just hoping they might? The silence that follows that question tells me everything. Hope is not expectation. Hope is wishful thinking dressed in better clothes. Hope says, maybe if I'm lucky. Expectation says, this is already mine in consciousness. Hope keeps you waiting. Expectation brings it forth. Your subconscious mind doesn't respond to your hopes. It responds to your convictions. It doesn't care about your desires. It cares about your desires. It cares about what you accept as true. And here's the challenging part. Your subconscious accepts as true whatever you persistently think and feel, whether it benefits you or destroys you. This is both the problem and the solution. If your subconscious has accepted limitation as true, it will work tirelessly to prove that limitation in your experience. But the very moment you begin to impress it with a new truth, it begins working just as tirelessly to manifest that instead. Think about that person you know who seems to have natural good fortune. Everything they touch turns to gold. Everything they touch turns to gold. Opportunities find them. People want to help them. What's their secret? It's not luck. It's not privilege, though that's what we tell ourselves to avoid the responsibility of our own mental habits. Their secret is simple. They expect good. They expect good. They approach life with a fundamental assumption that things will work out, that people are generally helpful, that opportunities are abundant. And because they expect it, they perceive it. And because they perceive it, and because they perceive it, they act on it. And because they act on it, they experience it. This is what psychologists call a self-fulfilling prophecy. But it's more than just psychologists call a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's spiritual law. It's the mechanics of consciousness itself. Your subconscious mind doesn't judge whether your beliefs are good for you or harmful. It doesn't debate whether they're true or false. It simply accepts what you habitually think and feel as instructions as orders and proceeds to manifest conditions that match those instructions. Think of a woman who constantly says, "I'm so forgetful, I can't remember anything anymore." She's not describing a fixed reality. She's not describing a fixed reality. She's giving her subconscious mind a directive, and her subconscious, being utterly obedient, begins to fulfill that directive. Her memory actually deteriorates because she has decreed it should be so. But the moment she changes her inner speech, the moment she begins to affirm, "My memory is improving every day. I remember easily and effortlessly," something shifts. The same subconscious mind that was working to fulfill the negative decree now works with equal power to fulfill the positive one. This is why I tell you, be careful of what you say after "I am." Those two words are among the most powerful in any language. When you say, "I am weak, I am confused, I am unlucky," you are not merely describing yourself. You are defining yourself. You are defining yourself. You are issuing a command to the creative power within you. Your subconscious mind hears "I am" and responds, "Yes, you are, and I will make certain that your outer world reflects this inner conviction." Many people complain about their circumstances without realizing they are the authors of those circumstances. Without realizing they are the authors of those circumstances. They say, "Why does this always happen to me?" without understanding that the "always" is the very problem. By declaring that something always happens, they ensure it will continue to happen. They ensure it will continue to happen. They have installed a permanent program in their subconscious mind. The truth is this: what you feel, you attract. What you imagine, you become. What you consistently impress upon your subconscious mind must, by law, appear in your experience. This is why so many people struggle. This is why so many people struggle. They say they want success, but their inner conversation is filled with doubt. They affirm abundance while feeling poverty. They affirm abundance while feeling poverty. They speak of confidence while imagining failure. And then they wonder why nothing changes. You cannot fool your subconscious mind. It doesn't respond to your subconscious mind. It doesn't respond to your words. It responds to your feeling, to the conviction behind those words. When you say "I am prosperous" while feeling poor, your subconscious accepts the feeling, not the statement. The feeling is the language it understands. Let me give you a practical example. Suppose you desire a new position, a better job with greater income and responsibility. You may repeat 1,000 times, "I have a wonderful new position." But if, when you say these words, you feel the anxiety of your current situation, if you feel unworthy or doubtful, you are impressing poverty and lack upon your subconscious, not prosperity and success. The correct method is this: you must feel yourself already in that new position. You must feel yourself already in that new position. You must imagine the congratulations of friends, the satisfaction of meaningful work, the feeling of financial ease. You must wear the feeling of your wish fulfilled, like a comfortable garment. When that feeling becomes natural, when you can sustain it without effort, your subconscious accepts it as true. And what your subconscious accepts it as true, and what your subconscious accepts as true, it must externalize in your world. I've seen this principle work in countless lives. A woman once came to me, desperate for employment after months of rejection. She had sent applications everywhere, attended interviews, but always with a feeling of desperation and fear. I explained to her that she was impressing failure upon her subconscious mind through her emotional state. I instructed her to stop the frantic searching for 1 week. Instead, each night before sleep, she was to imagine a specific scene, herself calling a friend and joyfully announcing, "I got the position." She was to hear her friend's excited congratulations, feel the relief and happiness, and fall asleep in that satisfied state. Within 5 days, she received a phone call about a position she'd applied for weeks earlier, one she'd completely forgotten about. The interview was merely a formality. The job was hers. What changed? Not the external circumstances initially, but her internal state. She impressed success upon her subconscious through feeling, and her subconscious orchestrated the events to match that impression. This is the law. Your subconscious mind is always working, always creating, always bringing into your experience whatever you consistently feel and believe to be true. Now, you might be wondering, if my subconscious is always working, always creating, why isn't my life exactly as I want it to be right now? This is perhaps the most important question you can ask yourself, because the answer holds the key to everything you desire. The truth is this: your subconscious mind does not distinguish between what you consciously want and what you habitually think about. It doesn't care about your New Year's resolutions, your vision boards, or your stated goals. It only responds to the dominant mental attitude you hold, the beliefs you feed it consistently, day after day, through your thoughts, your feelings, and your inner conversations. Let me give you a concrete example. I once counseled a man who desperately wanted financial abundance. He would affirm prosperity every morning. He would visualize wealth. He would tell everyone about his goals. Yet month after month, year after year, he remained in the same struggling financial condition. When I asked him to honestly examine his inner dialogue throughout the day, he was shocked at what he discovered. Between his morning affirmations and his evening prayers, his mind was filled with worry. How will I pay this bill? I can't afford that. Rich people are greedy. Money doesn't grow on trees. I'll never get ahead. These thoughts ran through his mind dozens, perhaps hundreds of times each day. And what were these thoughts doing? They were impressing upon his subconscious mind the very poverty he claimed he wanted to escape. You see, your subconscious mind accepts the thoughts you repeat, most often with feeling. Not the thoughts you think once, often with feeling. Not the thoughts you think once or twice while doing your affirmations, but the thoughts that dominate your mental atmosphere throughout the day. This is why casual wishful thinking produces no results. This is why reading one book or listening to one lecture changes nothing unless you apply the principles consistently. The subconscious mind is like a garden. Whatever seeds you plant, whether flowers or weeds, it will grow. It does not judge. It does not select. It simply accepts and creates. If you plant seeds of lack, fear and limitation, you will harvest experiences of lack, fear and limitation. If you plant seeds of abundance, health and success, you will harvest those instead. Your subconscious mind is like a garden that never sleeps. It is constantly growing something. The question is not whether it will produce. It will always produce. The question is, what are you planting? Every thought you think, every image you hold in your mind, every word you speak to yourself, these are seeds. And your subconscious mind is the most fertile soil in existence. It never questions the quality of the seed. It never says, "Are you sure you want to grow this?" It simply takes what you give it and begins the process of manifestation. I want you to understand something profound here. Most people are gardeners who have never looked at their garden. They walk through life completely unaware of what they've been planting. They wonder why they're experiencing weeds, thorns, and poisonous plants, never realizing they planted those seeds themselves through habitual negative thinking. You might say, "But I don't want to be sick. I don't want to be poor. I don't want to fail." Of course you don't. No one consciously desires these things. But desire alone is not planting. If you spend your days thinking, "I hope I don't get sick," you are planting sickness. If you constantly worry, "I hope I don't run out of money," you are planting poverty. The subconscious mind does not hear the don't. It only receives the dominant image. This is why I teach that you must become deliberate in your mental diet. Just as you would not eat spoiled food and expect physical health, you cannot consume toxic thoughts and expect a healthy life. You must guard your mind as carefully as you would guard your most precious possession, because your mind is your most precious possession. Begin to notice what you're planting throughout your day. When you wake up in the morning, what is the first thought you think? Is it gratitude and expectation of good, or is it dread and anxiety about what the day might bring? When you interact with others, are you planting seeds of kindness and respect, or criticism and judgment? When you think about your future, do you see yourself succeeding and thriving, or struggling and barely surviving? Every single moment is a planting moment. And here's the beautiful truth. You can change your harvest by changing what you plant today. Right now, this very moment. You don't need to wait for perfect conditions. You don't need to wait for perfect conditions. You don't need to understand every mechanism of how this works. You simply need to begin planting the seeds you want to see grow in your life. Let me share with you a profound truth that changed everything for me. Your subconscious mind doesn't argue with you. It doesn't debate. It doesn't debate. It doesn't question whether what you're impressing upon it is true or false, good or bad, possible or impossible. It simply accepts what you persistently think and feel as real, and then goes to work to make it manifest in your outer world. This is both the greatest opportunity and the greatest responsibility you'll ever have. Think about this for a moment. When you repeatedly say, "I can't afford this," for a moment. When you repeatedly say, "I can't afford this," your subconscious doesn't say, "Well, let's examine your bank account and see if that's accurate." No, it accepts that instruction and begins to create circumstances that match that belief. It closes doors. It blinds you to opportunities. It creates a filter through which you see only lack. But when you say with feeling, "Abundance flows to me freely," your subconscious accepts that too. And it begins to open your eyes to opportunities that were always there, but invisible to you before. It draws circumstances, people, and ideas that align with prosperity. I've watched this happen thousands of times. A woman came to me once, tears streaming down her face, convinced she would never find love because of painful experiences in her past. She had built a fortress around her heart, all while desperately longing for companionship. The contradiction was tearing her apart. I asked her to do something simple. Every night before sleep, when the subconscious is most receptive, imagine herself loved, cherished, and appreciated. Not by any specific person, but to feel the feeling of being loved. To hear words of kindness. To hear words of kindness. To sense the warmth of genuine affection. She resisted at first. "But I'm just making it up," she protested. "Exactly," I told her. Make it up until your subconscious makes it real. Within 3 months, not only had her entire demeanor transformed, but she met someone who treated her with the exact love and respect she had been imagining. Was it magic? No. It was law. She changed her inner harvest, and her outer world reflected that change. Your subconscious doesn't argue with you. It doesn't say, "Well, I don't think so." It doesn't debate. It accepts, and once it accepts, it begins to outpicture. This is why you must become vigilant, not tense, but aware of what you're feeding into this creative medium within you. I've seen people literally talk themselves into failure. They say, "I never get the breaks, things never work out for me, I'm just unlucky." And year after year, their experience confirms their inner conviction. Not because fate is against them, but because their subconscious is faithfully reproducing the pattern they've impressed upon it. Listen carefully, your subconscious is impersonal. It doesn't care whether you impress success or failure, health or sickness, abundance or poverty. It simply takes the blueprint you give it and builds accordingly. You wouldn't hand an architect plans for a shack and expect a mansion, would you? Of course not. Yet people do this mentally every single day. They hold images of limitation, rehearse conversations of defeat, imagine worst-case scenarios, and then wonder why their lives don't improve. The subconscious mind works according to the law of belief. Whatever you believe subjectively becomes your experience objectively, Let me give you another example. A man I counseled who suffered from chronic insomnia. He'd tried everything, pills, routines, therapy. Nothing worked. When I spoke with him, the problem became clear immediately. Every night, as he lay down, he would think, "I hope I can sleep tonight. I probably won't. I never do." His subconscious heard that as a command. I instructed him to change his inner speech. Before sleep, he was to simply affirm with feeling, "I sleep in peace. My mind and body relax completely. I wake refreshed. No force, no struggle. Just gentle, repeated acceptance of this idea. Within a week, he was sleeping like a child. Nothing external had changed. His bedroom was the same. His mattress was the same. What changed was the same. What changed was the impression he made upon his subconscious mind. This is the foundation of all lasting change. You don't need new circumstances. You need a new consciousness. You don't need the world to shift. You need your inner vision to shift. I've watched people transform their entire reality while sitting in the same chair, living in the same chair, living in the same house, working the same job. The external remained constant. The external remained constant. The internal became volcanic. And here's what most people miss. Your subconscious doesn't distinguish between a real experience and one vividly imagined. It accepts what you repeatedly impress upon it. It doesn't argue. It doesn't argue. It doesn't question. It simply accepts and manifests. When that young man imagined himself congratulated night after night, his subconscious mind accepted it as fact. And once accepted it as fact, and once accepted, it moved heaven and earth to make the outer world conform to the inner conviction. This is not philosophy. This is not philosophy. This is law, mental law as reliable as the law of gravity. You cannot hold one image in your mind consistently and experience something different in your world. It's impossible. Your outer world is the mirror, and your inner world is the face before the mirror. Change the face, and the reflection must change. So many come to me exhausted from trying to change their reflection. They're fighting effects instead of causes. They're rearranging the furniture in the mirror, wondering why their room looks the same. Stop fighting the reflection. Turn away from it. Go within. Impress your subconscious mind with the state you desire. Feel it. Accept it. Live in the assumption that it's already done. I'll tell you about a woman who came to me unable to pay her rent. She had $17 to her name and a notice of eviction. She was frantic, desperate, looking for a miracle from the outside. I told her, the miracle is within you, tonight, as you fall asleep. Feel yourself relieved. Feel the burden lifted. Don't imagine how the money comes. Just feel the freedom of having it handled. She protested. She wanted to know the mechanism. She wanted to know the mechanism. She wanted the logic. I said, your subconscious mind knows 1,000 ways you don't. Your job is to plant the seed, not to dig it up every hour to check if it's growing. She looked at me, puzzled at first. Then something shifted in her face. She said, you mean I have to trust it? I said, exactly. Trust is the bridge between your conscious desire and your subconscious power. Within 6 months, she called me. She'd been offered a position at a hospital she'd always admired. The salary was better than she'd imagined. The work suited her perfectly. She said to me, it happened so naturally I almost didn't notice it unfolding. That's how it works when you truly let go. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking, but Dr. Murphy, I've tried this. I've repeated affirmations, I've visualized. Nothing happened. Let me be direct with you. If nothing happened, let me be direct with you. If nothing happened, you didn't really believe it. You went through the motions. You said the words, but your heart wasn't in it. Your subconscious mind responds to feeling, not just words. You can repeat, I am prosperous 10,000 times. But if, while you're saying it, you're feeling anxious about your bank account, you're impressing anxiety on your subconscious, not prosperity. The feeling is the secret. When you affirm something, you must feel it as already true. You must generate within yourself the emotional state you would experience if your desire were already fulfilled. That's what impresses the subconscious. That's what sets the creative forces in motion. I once worked with a man who wanted to start his own business. He would visualize his business every night. He'd see the office, the clients, the success, but nothing moved forward. He remained stuck. I asked him, when you visualize your business, how do you feel as your business? How do you feel? He said, honestly, I feel afraid. I keep thinking about all the ways it could fail. There was his problem. He was impressing fear on his subconscious, not success. His visualization was actually working against him. I taught him to change his approach. Instead of forcing the images, I told him to recall a time when he felt truly confident and capable. Then, while holding that feeling, to gently imagine his business thriving. The difference was immediate. Within weeks, opportunities began to appear. A potential partner reached out. Financing became available. His business launched within the year. The lesson: your subconscious doesn't argue with your feelings. It accepts them as instructions. When you feel prosperous, you become prosperous. You become prosperous. When you feel healthy, you become healthy. When you feel healthy, you become healthy. When you feel loved, you become loved. This is not wishful thinking. This is not wishful thinking. This is the law of your own mind in action. I remember a woman who came to me in desperation. Her marriage was falling apart. Her marriage was falling apart. Every day she would tell me about her husband's faults, his coldness, his indifference. I listened patiently, and then I asked her a simple question. When you think of your husband, what do you feel? She paused. I feel hurt, angry, disappointed. And how do you think those feelings are shaping your experience? I asked. She looked at me, confused. Every time you think of him, I explained, you're generating feelings of hurt and anger. You're generating feelings of hurt and anger. Your subconscious mind receives these feelings as instructions. It then creates experiences that match those feelings. You're not experiencing your husband as he is. You're experiencing your feelings about him. I gave her an assignment. For 30 days she was to imagine her husband as the loving, attentive man she wanted him to be. More importantly, she was to feel the feelings of being loved, appreciated, and cherished. She was to fall asleep every night feeling grateful for her marriage. But that's not true, she protested. He doesn't love me like that. Your subconscious doesn't know what's true or false, I reminded her. It only knows what you feel. Change the feeling, and you change the experience. She was skeptical, but she tried it anyway. Within 2 weeks, her husband's behavior began to shift. Within a month, their marriage had transformed. He became more attentive, more affectionate, more present. Had he changed, or had she changed? Or had she changed the filter through which she was experiencing him? The answer is both. When you change your inner state, you change your outer world. Your subconscious mind doesn't just affect you, it affects everyone and everything around you. Your feelings radiate outward like ripples in a pond, influencing the entire field of your experience. This is why gratitude is so powerful. When you feel grateful, you're telling your subconscious, more of this, please. Your subconscious responds by creating more experiences that match that feeling of gratitude. I've seen this principle transform lives in the most unexpected ways. A woman once wrote to me explaining how she had been struggling financially for years. She tried affirmations, visualization, even creating vision boards, but nothing seemed to work. Then she shifted her approach. Instead of focusing on what she wanted, she began feeling grateful for what she already had. She felt genuine appreciation for the roof over her head, for the food on her table, for the ability to see and hear and move. Within weeks, opportunities began appearing. A former colleague reached out with a job offer. An unexpected refund arrived in the mail. Her landlord reduced her rent. None of these things required her direct action in the traditional sense. They emerged from the field of possibility because her emotional frequency had changed. This is the secret that most people miss. They think manifestation is about doing more, trying harder, pushing against reality. But true manifestation is about aligning your inner state with what you desire. It's about becoming energetically compatible with your desired outcome. When you feel abundant, you attract abundance. When you feel abundant, you attract abundance. When you feel loved, you attract love. When you feel confident, you attract opportunities that match that confidence. Your subconscious doesn't distinguish between a feeling generated by external circumstances and a feeling you consciously cultivate. To your subconscious, a feeling is a feeling, and whatever feeling dominates your consciousness becomes the blueprint for your external experience. This is why I always emphasize the importance of living in the end. Don't wait for your circumstances to change before you feel the joy of achievement. Feel it now. Don't postpone your happiness until some future event. Experience it in this present moment. Your subconscious is always listening, always responding, always creating. Give it the right instructions through your feelings and watch as your world reshapes itself to match your inner reality. I've witnessed this transformation in countless lives. A woman came to me once, trapped in a cycle of financial struggle that seemed to repeat itself year after year. She worked hard, yet money slipped through her fingers like water. When I asked her to describe her relationship with money, she said, "Money comes and goes. I never seem to hold on to it." There was your answer, right in her own words. Her subconscious had accepted this as truth, and it was faithfully reproducing this pattern in her experience. We began a new practice. Each night before sleep, when the conscious mind steps aside and the subconscious becomes most receptive, she would repeat with feeling, "I am a magnet for prosperity. Money flows to me easily and I use it wisely." But here's what made the difference. She didn't just recite these words mechanically. She felt the relief of financial security. She felt the relief of financial security. She imagined the peace of having reserves. She experienced gratitude for abundance even before it materialized in her physical reality. Within months, opportunities she had never noticed before began appearing. A chance to increase her income, an unexpected refund, a skill she possessed that others valued and would pay for. The universe hadn't suddenly changed, her consciousness had changed, and the universe reflected that change back to her. This is the great secret that transforms lives. Your subconscious mind accepts whatever you genuinely feel to be true. It doesn't argue. It doesn't question your worthiness. It simply takes the dominant feeling you offer it and says, "Your wish is my command." Think about the implications of this truth. If you constantly feel anxious about your health, your subconscious accepts anxiety as your request. If you feel certain about your body's strength and vitality, your subconscious accepts that certainty. The feeling is the command. The feeling is the command. The feeling is the prayer that's always answered. This is why affirmations without feeling accomplish nothing. You can say "I am confident" 1,000 times, but if you feel timid while saying it, the feeling wins every time. Your subconscious responds to the emotional frequency you're broadcasting, not the words you're speaking. So how do we master this? How do we master this? How do we become deliberate creators rather than unconscious reactors? We must learn to generate feeling independent of circumstances. This is where most people stumble. They wait for conditions to be perfect before they allow themselves to feel the way they want to feel. They say, "I'll be happy when I get the promotion. I'll feel confident when I lose the weight. I'll feel worthy when I find the relationship." But that's backwards. That's giving your power away to external circumstances. The truth is, you must feel it first. You must feel it first. You must generate the feeling now, regardless of what's happening around you. This isn't pretending. This isn't denial. This is conscious creation. This is you taking responsibility for your inner state and refusing to let conditions dictate your emotional reality. I learned this myself through trial and error. There was a period in my life when I was waiting for success to feel successful, waiting for recognition to feel confident. And you know what happened? Nothing, because the universe doesn't respond to your wishes or your words. It responds to your wishes or your words. It responds to your state of being. It responds to the vibrational frequency you're broadcasting through your feelings. So I started practicing something I call emotional independence. Every morning before I checked my circumstances, before I looked at my bank account or my calendar or my problems, I would sit quietly and generate the feelings I wanted to experience. If I wanted to feel abundant, I would recall a time when I felt that way, or I would imagine how abundance would feel in my body. The lightness, the freedom, the ease. At first it felt artificial. My logical mind kept saying, "But this isn't real, you're just making it up." And yes, I was making it up. That's the point. You are always making it up. You're always making it up. You're either consciously choosing your inner state or unconsciously absorbing whatever conditions suggest you should feel. But here's what happened. As I practiced this day after day, something shifted. The feelings became easier to access. They became more real. And then circumstances began to shift to match those feelings. Opportunities appeared. Solutions emerged. People responded to me differently because I was different. This is the secret that changes everything. You are not at the mercy of your world. You're not at the mercy of your world. Your world is at the mercy of your consciousness. When you take command of your inner state, when you become the deliberate architect of your feelings, you take command of your creative power. And here's what so few understand. This is not a part-time practice. This is not a part-time practice. This is not something you do when it's convenient, when you feel inspired, when circumstances align in your favor. This is the foundation of your life. Every moment you spend indulging feelings that contradict your desire, you are actively creating more of what you don't want. Every moment you shift into the feeling of your wish fulfilled, you are building the bridge to its manifestation. Think about the farmer who plants seeds. Does he plant them one day, then dig them up the next to see if they're growing? Does he water them Monday, ignore them Tuesday, curse them Wednesday, and then wonder why his harvest fails? Of course not. He tends his field daily. He protects the seeds from weeds. He maintains the conditions necessary for growth. And in time, inevitably, the harvest comes. Your consciousness is your field. Your feeling is the seed. Your persistence in that feeling is the tending. The manifestation is the harvest. You cannot skip steps. You cannot be casual about this and expect extraordinary results. I've watched people transform their entire lives, health, wealth, relationships, career, not because they were lucky, not because they were lucky, not because they were more deserving than others, but because they refused to abandon the feeling of their wish fulfilled. They made a decision that no circumstance, no opinion, no appearance would shake them from their inner knowing. One woman came to me after years of financial struggle, bill collectors calling, eviction notices, shame and fear dominating her days. I taught her this principle. She began to feel wealthy before she had a dollar to her name. She walked differently. She walked differently. She spoke differently. She made decisions from abundance, not lack. Was it easy? No. Did her circumstances immediately change? No, but she persisted. Within months, opportunities appeared. A better job, unexpected money, new connections. Within 2 years, she was living a life that once seemed impossible. What changed? Not the world, her consciousness. And because consciousness is the only reality, her world had no choice but to conform. This is your power. This is your power. This is your birthright. When you understand that consciousness is the only reality, you realize something profound. There is no power outside of you. None. The world is not acting upon you, you are acting upon the world through your consciousness. Every condition, every circumstance, every person in your life is a reflection of the state you've been dwelling in. This is why changing the outer world without changing your inner state is impossible. It's like trying to change your reflection in a mirror by painting the glass. The reflection will only change when you change what stands before the mirror, and what stands before the mirror, and what stands before the mirror of life. Your consciousness, your habitual thinking, your dominant mental attitude. I've seen people spend decades trying to change their circumstances through force and struggle. They work harder, they fight longer, they push against every obstacle, and yet nothing fundamentally changes. Why? Because they're trying to change the reflection instead of changing themselves. They're operating from the belief that the world is the cause, and they are the effect. But the truth is the exact opposite. You are the cause, and the world is the effect. Let me share something that happened to a man who came to one of my lectures years ago. He owned a small business that was failing. He was convinced that the economy was against him, that his competitors were too strong, that customers were too difficult. He had a reason for everything that was wrong in his business, and every one of those reasons pointed outward. Every one of them blamed something outside himself. I told him what I'm telling you now. Your business is not failing because of the economy or your competitors. Your business is a mirror reflection of your consciousness. Change your consciousness, and your business must change. He didn't believe me at first. Like most people, he was so hypnotized by the world of effects that he couldn't see the cause, but he was desperate enough to try. He began to work on his inner world. Instead of dwelling on failure, he assumed the feeling of success. Instead of thinking about what was wrong, he imagined what it would feel like if everything was right. He stopped reacting to the outer circumstances and started creating from his inner consciousness. Within 6 months, his business completely transformed. New opportunities appeared. Better customers came. Problems that seemed insurmountable simply dissolved. But here's what he told me that I'll never forget. The business didn't really change, I changed. And when I changed, everything else had to change with me. That's the secret. The world is plastic to your touch when you know that consciousness is the only reality. You see, most people think they need to go out there and wrestle reality into submission. They think success means working harder, pushing more, forcing doors open. And yes, action is necessary, but not the kind of action that comes from desperation or lack. The action that transforms your world must flow from the assumption that it's already done. Let me share something with you that might sound radical. Your outer world has no choice but to reflect your inner convictions. None whatsoever. It's not being stubborn. It's not resisting you. It's simply being obedient to the only law it knows, the law of consciousness. When you walk into a room assuming you're unwanted, people feel that. When you approach an opportunity believing you're not quite good enough, that belief broadcasts itself in 1,000 subtle ways. Your posture shifts. Your voice changes. Your eyes tell the story your words try to hide. But when you dare to assume the wish fulfilled, when you take on the feeling of already being what you want to be, your entire energy changes. And people respond to energy far more than they respond to words. I remember a woman who came to one of my lectures years ago. She was talented, educated, brilliant even, but she couldn't get past the interview stage for the positions she really wanted. She'd prepare exhaustively, but the moment she sat across from the interviewer, she'd feel herself shrinking. I asked her, "How do you feel when you walk into those interviews?" She said, "Honestly, like I'm hoping they'll give me a chance, like I'm asking permission to prove myself." There it was. She was assuming the state of the beggar, not the state of the sought-after professional. I told her to change one thing. Before your next interview, sit quietly and feel what it would be like if they were hoping you would accept their offer. Feel yourself as someone they'd be lucky to have. 3 weeks later, she sent me a letter. She got the position and they created it specifically for her. Stories like hers aren't exceptions. They're demonstrations of a law that never fails. When you change your inner conviction, your outer world has no choice but to reflect it. This isn't about positive thinking or wishful hoping. It's about occupying a state until that state becomes your natural dwelling place. I remember a young man who came to one of my lectures in Los Angeles. He was trying to start a business, but every door seemed closed. No investors, no partners, no customers. He asked me what he was doing wrong. I said, "You're not doing anything wrong on the outside, but every time you approach someone, you're radiating doubt. You believe they'll say no before you even speak, and so they do not because they're against you, but because they're responding to the silent broadcast of your consciousness." He asked what he should do differently. I told him, stop trying to convince anyone of anything. Instead, every night before sleep, imagine one person, just one, coming to you and saying, "I've been looking for exactly what you're offering." Feel the relief, feel the relief, feel the naturalness of it. Do this until it feels more real than your current circumstances. He practiced this faithfully for 2 weeks. On the 16th day, he met someone at a coffee shop, someone who'd been searching for precisely the service he provided. That person became his first major client, and from that relationship, his entire business grew. You see, the subconscious doesn't argue. It doesn't question, doesn't argue. It doesn't question. It simply accepts what you impress upon it and then moves heaven and earth to make it manifest. When you repeatedly feel something to be true, you're not pretending, you're actually restructuring the very foundation of your experience. This is why I say, assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled. Don't wait for proof. Don't wait for proof. Don't wait for permission. The proof comes after the assumption, never before. Permission is something you give yourself through the conviction of your own consciousness. This is why I always say, live from the end. Live as though the wish fulfilled is already a fact in your world. Not as a technique you perform once a day, but as the state you return to moment by moment. When someone asks you about your dream, don't speak of it as something distant. Speak of it as something distant. Speak of it with the quiet certainty of someone who knows. When you think of your desire, don't reach for it, trust in it. Feel the naturalness of its presence in your life. This is not pretending, this is not delusional thinking. This is the recognition that your consciousness is the only reality you will ever know, and therefore the state you occupy within it determines what manifests without. You see, most people are walking through life backwards. They're waiting for the outer world to change so they can finally feel different inside. They say, when I have the money, I'll feel abundant. When I meet the person, I'll feel loved. When I meet the person, I'll feel loved. When I get the recognition, I'll feel worthy. But that's not how creation works. You must reverse the order completely. Feel abundant now and money flows. Feel loved now and love appears. Feel worthy now and recognition follows. The feeling is the secret. The feeling is the secret. The feeling is the prayer. The feeling is the creative act itself. And I'm not talking about miracle, and I'm not talking about manufactured emotion or forced enthusiasm. I'm speaking of the quiet inner knowing, the settled assumption that it is done. This is what I mean when I speak of feeling. It's the acceptance of the wish fulfilled as fact. You might wonder, but Joseph, how do I maintain this feeling when everything around me contradicts it? This is where persistence becomes your greatest ally. Not the persistence becomes your greatest ally, not the persistence of assumption. Every time doubt knocks, you gently return to your assumption. Every time fear whispers, you calmly redirect your attention to the state of the wish fulfilled. You don't fight the old thoughts, you simply withdraw your power from them by refusing to give them your sustained attention. Remember, consciousness is the only reality. What you are conscious of being, you become. Not what you wish to being, you become. Not what you wish to be. Not what you hope to be, but what you are conscious of being right now, in this moment. This is why affirmations fail for so many people. They stand in front of a mirror, repeating words they don't believe, feeling the contradiction in every syllable. I am wealthy, they say, while their consciousness screams, I am broke, and the subconsciousness screams, I am broke. And the subconscious mind, which knows no deception, responds only to what you truly accept as real. You cannot fool your deeper mind. It doesn't respond to words alone, it responds to words alone, it responds to conviction, to feeling, to the state of consciousness you genuinely inhabit. So the question becomes, how do you change what you are conscious of being? The answer is both simple and profound. You must become consciously aware of what you want to be. You must become consciously aware of what you want to be. You must dwell in that assumption until it becomes natural, until it becomes you. This is not pretending, this is not pretending. This is not positive thinking or wishful hoping. This is deliberate assumption, the conscious act of accepting as true what your senses deny. You do this through feeling, through imagination, through living from the end result rather than looking toward it. If you want to be financially secure, you must feel financially secure now, not tomorrow. Not tomorrow, not when the money arrives, now. You must move through your day with the calm assurance of someone who has abundance. You must make decisions from that state. You must react to circumstances from that consciousness. And here's what most people miss. You don't wait for evidence before assuming the state. The assumption comes first. The evidence follows, always. Your consciousness is not a mirror reflecting reality, it is the mold that shapes reality. What you are conscious of being, you become. What you feel yourself to be, you are. This is the final truth I want to leave with you today. Stop chasing, stop begging, stop begging, stop hoping that somehow, some way the universe will grant your wish. Instead, claim your desire now, in consciousness. Accept it as done. Feel it as real. Live from that end. And watch as the world rearranges itself to match the image you hold within. You are what